The school nurse called just after 8 a.m. Her voice was calm, too calm. "Mrs. Morgan, your daughter had a little incident at recess." But something in the way she said it made my stomach twist. Eliza doesn't just have incidents. By the time I reached the school office, she was sitting in one of those stiff vinyl chairs, knees together, arms folded across her chest. She looked up and smiled, a small practiced smile. "I'm fine, Mom." "Really?" But her eyes said something else. There was fear behind them. The kind of fear that doesn't come from falling on the playground. The kind that comes from staying silent too long. The nurse handed me the report. "Eliza says she tripped during tag. There's a bit of bruising. Nothing broken." But later at home, when I helped her change, I saw the truth. Not one bruise, three. One fading along her rib cage. Another dark and fresh across her forearm. And one more, faint but clear, shaped like fingers. I leaned down and gently took her hands in mine. "Eliza," I said softly, "please tell me what happened." She looked away, then whispered, "Grandma says I overreact. That boys play rough. And if I got hurt, I probably asked for it." That moment stopped everything. I'd heard those words before. From her father, from his mother. The Whitmores have always known how to protect themselves. How to rewrite truth until it becomes convenient. That night, I started documenting everything. The bruises. Eliza's words. The patterns I had ignored for too long. Because silence doesn't keep the peace. It keeps the harm hidden. And I was done being quiet. Just before we go deeper into this story, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? If this feels close to home in any way, you're not alone. I didn't sleep much that night. While Eliza finally rested, I sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through old photos on my phone. And suddenly I saw it. In every picture taken after a Whitmore weekend. Eliza looked just a little bit smaller. Her smile was tight. Her shoulders slightly hunched. She never stood close to her cousin Mason, Loretta's golden boy. I hadn't wanted to see it before. But now, I couldn't unsee it. The next morning I called a friend, Mariah. A family lawyer with a reputation for being kind but relentless. "I don't know if I'm overreacting," I told her. Mariah didn't hesitate. "You're not. You're finally reacting. Start writing everything down. Every detail. Every bruise. Every word." So I did. Meanwhile, I kept Eliza home for a few days. No mention of school. No talk of Mason. Just pancakes, watercolor, warm baths, and space to breathe. But by the third night, she brought it up herself. She was brushing her teeth when she turned to me in the mirror and asked, "Will Mason be mad that I told?" I froze. She hadn't said his name before. Not once. "You're not in trouble, sweetie," I said gently. "Nothing you told me was wrong." Her voice was barely a whisper. "He said if I told anyone, Grandma would be disappointed in me. That I was ruining the family." She hesitated. Then added, "He told me no one would believe me anyway. That he could make me look like a liar. And he said if I made trouble, I'd be sent away." I knelt beside her and looked her in the eyes. "Eliza, no one who loves you should ever make you feel like being safe is a bad thing." That night, she drew a picture. It showed a little girl locked in a box. A bigger figure stood outside, smiling. The girl's eyes were hollow. She titled it, "Don't Tell." And that's when I realized, this wasn't just about one bruise. This had been happening for a long, long time. I brought the drawing to Mariah the next day. She didn't need long to look at it. "She's not just scared," Mariah said quietly. "She's internalizing blame." That's what families like the Whitmores do best. They hand shame down like heirlooms. That afternoon, I emailed Eliza's teacher, and her school counselor, and her pediatrician. The responses came quickly and quietly. Her teacher had noticed the change. Eliza had stopped raising her hand in class. She no longer played with her best friend at recess. And 2 weeks ago, she wet her pants during math. She didn't want to tell anyone, the teacher wrote. She said she didn't want to be dramatic. Those words again, planted in her like weeds. The school counselor, Mrs. Dempsey, agreed to meet with me the next day. She was warm, direct, and clearly already concerned. Eliza's mentioned the word closet 3 times in our sessions, she said. Not in a playful way. In a hiding kind of way. I felt the air leave my lungs. Do you think she's safe with them? I asked. Mrs. Dempsey didn't answer right away. Then she said, I think you're doing the right thing by asking the question. Before I called Charles, I thought about the version of him Eliza used to adore. The one who took her to Saturday pancake runs and saved all her glittery drawings in his office drawer. Those moments had faded in recent years, replaced by distance and by Loretta's growing influence. But part of me still hoped that when it came to Eliza's safety, that version of him might show up again. There were times I caught glimpses of the father he used to be. But those moments never lasted long. Loretta's voice was always louder, not in volume, but in certainty. She had a way of making people feel foolish for disagreeing with her. And Charles, for all his intelligence, rarely challenged her. I used to wonder if it was guilt, tradition, or just fear of confrontation. Either way, Eliza always came second to keeping Loretta's version of peace. That evening I called Charles, my ex-husband. It went exactly how I expected. He sighed. Loud enough for the phone to catch it. So now you're trying to paint my family as abusers? I'm not trying anything, I replied. I'm telling you what Eliza told me. What her teachers have seen. What her drawings show. She's always been sensitive, he said flatly. She just needs to toughen up. You coddle her too much. There it was. The Whitmore playbook. Blame the victim. Control the story. Erase the evidence with charm and money. But this time I had no intention of letting it happen. I filed a formal report with Child Protective Services the next morning. And 2 days later, Loretta Whitmore opened her front door to a social worker standing on her manicured porch. The visit from Child Protective Services didn't go unnoticed. By sunset, Loretta had already called Charles. And Charles called me. You brought the state into our lives? His voice was sharper this time, not dismissive. Defensive. You've officially lost it. I'm protecting our daughter, I said evenly. You're trying to humiliate the only family she has. He snapped. No, I said, calm but cold. I'm refusing to let her be hurt behind closed doors just because those doors are expensive. He hung up without another word. By morning, the consequences started to unfold. I got an email from Eliza's school. Loretta had contacted the principal, questioning whether I was mentally stable enough to parent. Rumors swirled faster than facts. A teacher I barely knew avoided my eye in the parking lot. Another one, who used to compliment Eliza's art, suddenly went quiet. I later learned Loretta had offered a generous donation to the school's building fund. Right after her call to the principal. No one said it out loud, but I could feel it. Power trying to buy silence. A neighbor I barely knew texted. Loretta says you're going through a breakdown. I didn't want to believe it, but I didn't answer. Because I was already too busy collecting everything. Texts, drawings, counselor notes, the CPS intake report, even emails from the school. Mariah met me at my kitchen table that afternoon. She scanned the documents, nodding. They're trying to overwhelm you, she said. Standard tactic. Discredit the mother, reframe the narrative, build a false image of family unity. She looked me dead in the eyes. We're not going to let them. Meanwhile, Eliza started to change. It was subtle at first. She asked if she could sleep with the lights off again. She wore her favorite hoodie, the one she'd stopped wearing after Mason said it made her look like a baby. And one afternoon after therapy, she left a post-it on my desk. It read, I'm glad you believed me. I stared at it longer than I should have. Because even after everything, some part of me had wondered if I was doing the right thing. And in that little pink note, I got my answer. 2 days later, Mariah called with news. The Whitmores just filed a motion, she said. They're suing for full custody, claiming you're emotionally unstable and intentionally alienating Eliza from her father's side of the family. I felt a chill run through me. How fast are they moving? Very, she said. They're hoping to crush you before you can stand. I looked at the pile of evidence in front of me. The drawings. The reports. The truth. They're not the only ones who can stand. Court dates were set within the week. Faster than usual, but not unusual given the urgency. When a child's emotional safety is at stake, and documented evidence backs it, even the system speeds up. The Whitmores had hired a high-profile attorney from Charlotte. Polished. Cold. A man used to fixing reputations and burying victims under paperwork. They're not fighting for Eliza. Mariah told me. They're fighting for control. Meanwhile, Eliza's sessions with Mrs. Dempsey deepened. She started using words like scared, trapped, and angry. She stopped blaming herself for what Mason had done. One day, she came out of her session holding a drawing. A fox curled up inside a hollow log. Outside the log stood 3 towering shadows. I named her Ember, she said. She's hiding because the forest isn't safe. She's strong, I told her. She's learning, Eliza replied. That night, I added the drawing to our case file. A few days later, something unexpected happened. I received a message request on Facebook from someone I didn't know. Kelsey Reed. She used to work as a private tutor at the Whitmore estate. We met at a diner off the highway. She looked nervous, tired, and angry. They told me to sign an NDA, she said. But I kept records. I kept everything. She pulled out a folder emails from Loretta, screenshots of text messages. Notes about how Mason sometimes has trouble with boundaries. Reports from a therapist the family used to work with. Silenced after one too many concerns. They fired me after I said Mason needed intervention, Kelsey whispered. Loretta told me I was exaggerating. That I didn't understand boys from powerful families. She handed me everything. I'm willing to testify, she said. When I gave the file to Mariah, she didn't speak for a full minute. Then she looked up at me and said, This could change everything. But that wasn't the end. The next week, the court appointed a guardian ad litem, an independent representative for Eliza. And when she visited our home, Eliza met her at the door with something clutched in her hand. Her fox drawing. She's not scared anymore, Eliza told her. She's getting ready to come out. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not the temperature, the energy. Loretta sat straight-backed in a tailored navy suit. Charles beside her, stone-faced. Their lawyer, Mr. Granger, calmly reviewing his notes like this was just another business negotiation. Mariah leaned toward me and whispered, They're not here to listen. They're here to win. The judge, a woman in her 60s with tired eyes and a steel spine, called the room to order. We began. Mr. Granger struck first. He framed the case as one of maternal instability. Suggested I was emotionally manipulating Eliza to isolate her from her family. She's projecting her own trauma onto her daughter, he said. She's conflating minor childhood squabbles with abuse. I sat still. Because we were ready. Mariah stood. And over the next hour, she dismantled every piece of their illusion. Under North Carolina Statute Section 7B301, she said clearly, any person who suspects a child is being abused is legally obligated to report it, including educators, counselors, and yes, parents. She held up the CPS intake form. This isn't hysteria. It's compliance with the law. Then she turned to the judge. And per Section 50-13.2, custody decisions must prioritize the best interests of the child, especially when credible emotional harm has been documented. Emails, drawings, therapist reports, the school's documentation, and then the sworn statement from Kelsey Reed, the former tutor. Mr. Granger objected. Slander, he snapped. The judge narrowed her gaze. It's not slander if it's supported by records, she said. Then it was time for Eliza's guardian ad litem to speak. She stood, her voice steady, her findings clear. Eliza has shown consistent signs of emotional trauma connected directly to time spent with the Whitmore family. She expresses fear toward her cousin Mason, and guilt imposed by her grandmother. This child has been taught to equate silence with survival. A hush fell over the room. Then the judge asked, "Do you believe unsupervised visitation would be in the child's best interest?" "No, Your Honor," she said firmly. "I believe it would be a mistake." Granger tried to pivot. Called Loretta to the stand. Loretta's composure was flawless. She smiled. She denied. She deflected. "She's imaginative," she said of Eliza. "She has always enjoyed telling stories. But she made one mistake," she said. "I never saw anything inappropriate between Mason and Eliza. If there had been anything concerning, I would have acted." Before the hearing, Mariah had received an unmarked envelope at her office. No return address. Inside was a flash drive clearly labeled, "Whitmore Security Backup June." She later confirmed with Kelsey that the Whitmores kept automated backups for legal reasons. "Someone wanted this seen," Mariah said. Mariah stood. She pulled out the final piece of evidence. A short clip from the Whitmores' own home security system, dated 6 months ago. Mason shoving Eliza, twisting her arm. Loretta in the background watching, not moving. Loretta paled. The judge leaned back in her chair, folded her hands, and said quietly, "Well, that's enough for today." The judge called for a recess. People started moving, whispering. But I stayed in my seat. Across the aisle, Loretta sat frozen. Charles stared straight ahead, his face unreadable. Mariah leaned toward me again. "She's not used to losing. She's not used to being seen," I replied. That afternoon, we reconvened in a much quieter room. Just me, Charles, Mariah, and the guardian ad litem. The judge began without preamble. "This case at its core is not about wealth or parenting styles. It's about safety and silence. What this child has endured is not a misunderstanding. It's a culture of dismissal." She turned to me. "Ms. Morgan, I am granting you full legal and physical custody. Mr. Whitmore may pursue supervised visitation after completing a trauma-informed parenting course." She looked at Charles. "You may choose your mother or your daughter, but you may not straddle both." He didn't speak, and for the first time, I didn't wait for him to. Outside the courthouse, Mariah squeezed my hand. "You did it." But I shook my head. "No, we're just beginning." Because justice on paper is one thing, healing is another. Back home, Eliza waited for me on the porch swing, her fox drawing in her lap. I sat beside her, wrapped her in the kind of hug I wish I'd known to give months ago. "Do I have to see them again?" she asked softly. "No, baby," I said. "Not until you want to. Not unless it's safe." She nodded. Then after a pause she whispered, "I think Ember can come out of the log now." That night she slept soundly. And for the first time in months so did I. 3 weeks passed. The leaves had begun to fall in Asheville, and the air turned crisp in the mornings. Eliza was back at school, not just attending, but thriving. She'd started raising her hand again, volunteering to read aloud, even inviting her best friend back for a sleepover. One afternoon, her teacher pulled me aside. "She wrote a poem during writing hours," she said. "I think you might want to see it." It was written in colored pencil, her favorite pink and orange mix, titled, "I'm Not Sorry. I'm not sorry for being small, or loud, or scared. I'm not sorry for telling, or crying, or saying no. I'm not sorry for being hurt. I'm not sorry for wanting to feel safe. I'm not sorry anymore." I cried in the car after reading it. Not because it was sad, but because it was strong. Eliza wasn't just healing. She was becoming. Meanwhile, Mariah encouraged me to share our journey. Not the names, not the case, but the truth. The quiet things mothers are told to ignore. The instincts we're taught to doubt. I wrote one post, then another, then 10 more. And somewhere in between telling our story, other mothers found their voices too. One evening, Eliza crawled into my lap with her sketchbook. She had drawn Ember again. This time, not in a hollow log. She was standing on a hill, head high, tail flicked, surrounded by smaller creatures smiling up at her. She's helping others now, Eliza said. She's not hiding anymore. I kissed the top of her head. I think she's brave. So are you, she whispered. 2 months later, I was invited to speak at a local parenting workshop. Just a small room at the community center. Folding chairs. Coffee and paper cups. Nothing fancy. But the room was packed. Some were teachers. Some were social workers. Most were mothers. And most looked like they hadn't slept through the night in years. I didn't tell them everything. I didn't need to. I told them what it feels like to know something's wrong, and be told you're imagining it. To be labeled overreactive, difficult, too emotional, when all you're trying to do is protect your child. I told them what it means to believe your daughter, even when it costs you comfort, even when it costs you family. When I finished, a woman raised her hand. She didn't ask a question. She just said, I thought I was the only one. And from the back, another voice added, You're not. That night, I found Eliza in her room building a tiny cardboard house for her stuffed animals. She'd cut out little windows and made tiny curtains from tissue. They need a safe place, she said simply. No yelling. No hiding. No closets. She looked up. They're not real. But it helps. I knelt beside her and helped tape down a wall. And in that quiet moment, I realized something. She wasn't just healing. She was rebuilding. And so was I. A few days earlier, her teacher had pulled me aside. We had a new girl this week, she said. Very quiet. Nervous. Wouldn't speak. Then she smiled. Until Eliza walked over during lunch and gave her her pudding cup. Sat beside her the whole hour. That night, Eliza mentioned her casually. Her name's Sophia. I told her it's okay to not want to talk yet. I didn't press. Just listened. Because that wasn't just kindness. That was survival turning into strength. It was a Sunday morning. The first one in a long time that didn't feel heavy. Eliza was in the backyard barefoot, chasing bubbles with our neighbor's dog. Laughing, not forced, not careful. Just laughing. I watched from the kitchen window, stirring a pot of oatmeal. For once, the silence in the house felt comforting. Not tense. Not waiting to break. On the fridge was her newest drawing. No fox this time. Just a girl. Standing under a tree. Arms out, head tilted back, letting the sunlight land fully on her face. She had written one sentence underneath. I don't have to hide anymore. I took a picture of it. Not to post. Not to prove anything. Just to remember what strength looks like. When it's quiet. Later that day, I opened my email. A message from a woman I didn't know. She wrote, I watched your story online. I have a daughter too. I've been so afraid to speak up. But after seeing how you stood by Eliza, I think I'm ready. I stared at her words for a long time. And then I replied, You don't have to be loud to be brave. But you do have to believe yourself first. If you're watching this, and you've ever been made to feel like you were too much, too sensitive, too dramatic, for simply noticing something was wrong, you are not wrong. You are not alone. And it is not too late. You get to break the cycle. You get to protect what matters. You get to stop hiding. And if no one's ever told you this before, I believe you.